Well, Scott Bakula, it's so good to have you back in the Emmy game. It's been 20 years since your last nomination. After several in a row for Quantum Leap, you're back again with Behind the Candelabra. Tell us about getting word on that morning that you were Emmy nominated.
Well, my phone rang, and I answered it quickly because the rest of the house was asleep, and it was my publicist, Jay, saying congratulations, and I completely obliviously was not focused that morning on it, and I said, for what? And he said, you got a nomination, and I said, the movie got nominated? How? And he said, no, you got a nomination. And I said, yeah, you're kidding, right? And he said no. So that was a wildly surprising way to start that morning, but it's been it's a good surprise. It's certainly a movie that I'm proud to be a part of, and I was grateful to be asked to be a part of it, and then to get this acknowledgement is fantastic.
As you're working on something like this, you've got to, I mean, you're on the set, obviously. You get to see people like Michael Douglas and Matt Damon in action, and, of course, Steven Soderbergh. You got to be feeling like, boy, this is a high-quality production we got going here.
Well, you know, of course that feels, you've got Michael Douglas, Steven Soderbergh, Matt Damon, Jerry Weintraub. You've got all these unbelievably high A-list Hollywood people, and they couldn't get the movie made. And in a funny way, it was the perfect storm in a sense, because more people have seen it and will see it on HBO than would have seen it in the theaters the way it was going to be released. And it's being released around the world and doing unbelievable box office and crazy good reviews in England and other places. So not surprisingly, but you want to, when you get a chance to work with that group of folks, and then you add everybody else to it, Debbie Reynolds, Dan Aykroyd, Rob Lowe and Tom Papa and all these other people, Cheyenne Jackson. It was really, it was a ball to do. We had a great time, and it's just a good, talented group of people.
Now, your character Bob Black is very important to this movie because you're the guy that instigates the whole plot. You introduce these two guys to each other.
Right, that is correct. There's been some conversation about how that all happened and what Bob Black's motivations were, and I leave that to the viewers to take from it what they will. But it's a strange something that happened a lot, certainly in the early days of the kind of the birthing of the out gay movement, in this country, that there were still a lot of certainly older gentlemen who were trying to have relationships quietly. There were a lot of younger men who were being pulled into that world for either because they wanted to be there, or they wanted to make money, and it was a strange one. The research that I did and the people that I talked to who were there was a strange, odd kind of time. There was a little bit of, everybody was kind of getting something, So my character, we meet. I find Matt in a gay bar in the late '70s in LA, and we develop a relationship, and I end up taking him to Las Vegas for his first time ever, and take him to see Liberace's show, and then once they've met, the rest is history.
Now, the clothes you wear and the whole look that you have, did that remind you of anything from your past? Was that anything you ever dressed up as?
A lot of it reminded me. I never was into the neck scarves, but the bell bottoms and I marvel. I had long hair for a long time, and mustaches came and went, but certainly I'm always astounded by the fabrics that existed, and I even hate to use the word fabric because that implies some kind of something that we know, but the chemical engineering that went into producing some of the clothes that were fabricated back in those times was astounding to put those clothes on again and see, like, oh my gosh, this stuff is still around, and it'll never age, it'll never go away because it's not real.
Now, leaving your category behind for just a second, voters have an incredibly difficult choice. I'm sure if you were to be voting in this other category, I mean, who do you choose, Michael Douglas or Matt Damon? They're up against each other.
That's tough. I've been in things before where you're kind of competing against somebody in your own show, and you wish it wouldn't have to be that way. and there's always but in this movie, it was clearly not a case where one of them could have been nominated as supporting. It just wasn't that kind of a. The roles were so big and so flashy, and their Academy has rules and things about how you can what determines what, but it's I think what happens a lot of times, and we'll see what happens with the voters. At this point, I just want one of them to win. That would be my selfish goal so I'd hate for them to split the vote or something and it goes somewhere else. That's the only danger I think there. But they both were uniquely gifted, beautiful performances, inspired performances, unusual performances in different ways. So it's hard to say, picking better. I wish they could share it, and I'm sure whomever, if one of them wins it, that's what they'll be doing. They'll be sharing it.
Well, as you mentioned, being up in the past, you were up in 90, 91, 92, 93 for Quantum Leap. Tell us about just your first Emmy nomination ever back in 1990.
Well, that was just, awards in our business are so strange because really you always feel when you get a job, you feel so rewarded because it's so hard to get a job. So to be, starring in this very interesting, quirky TV show with Dean Stockwell, with Donald Belisario as your producer, that was already, I was on the moon about that already. So, when award seasons roll around, people start talking, and to be thinking that might be a consideration for us the first year, I didn't even, we worked so hard on that show. I didn't know whether it was night or day for, 9 months half the time. So it was like, that would be great, and then you don't even think about it because it just seems completely unrelated to the work. But it was great because Dean got nominated and I got nominated. We had a few other nominations. So we were such a tight-knit group, the crew and the writers and everything. We just felt this great camaraderie to share it all. We had big luncheons on the set where we all celebrated together, and it was it was an extension of everybody's good work because that show was a huge group effort on all categories, and whether it was whoever got nominated, you represented so many other people that were behind you. Much like Candelabra, because it's a period piece, everybody has to be, and all those people got nominated. Ellen got nominated. Everybody got nominated for creating the world in such a beautiful way that we're walking into it. Half my work was done once I put the clothes on, to be quite honest.
The other great thing about Quantum, it's one thing to be singled out, and there's a lot of nominees this year. They may be the only nominee from their show, but with Quantum Leap, you were up for drama series several times. So that is truly a team effort then.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and it's first of all, it's very difficult to get nominated because the process is just to vote is I hate to use the word exhausting, but you really have to be dedicated to go sift through the nominating process. The actual voting for the award is much simpler because you have less choices and there's just much less kind of research, and there's an obligation that you feel. There are all these things, but when your show can find its way through it all to get recognition in any way at all, it's a nice feather in everybody's cap. And again, we don't do it for that. As I said before, just getting the job is a great reward, and then getting to do good work with good people is really what it's all about. But we've, out of necessity in our world, entertainment world, we've found this outlet where we can celebrate the work, and so it's nice to be in the group.
I was looking back. I was trying to remember. I was a young guy watching Quantum Leap, and I was trying to remember what episode you submitted, and I remember that 91 year, your second nomination, was one of your best episodes ever. That was that shock therapy episode. Yes. Where, because of various reasons, your character was going in and out of a lot of the other characters that he had been over the years. Tell me about that particular episode and playing just such a multitude of characters.
Well, that episode was unique for our show because of we were able to kind of stretch the boundaries of the show a little bit, and because of the shock therapy, I was able to take on a little bit more characteristics and physical. It was kind of my Sybil episode, if you will, and it was well done. Great group of actors working on it with me. Great script, and every year was a challenge to submit something, because in a series you're only allowed to submit one episode. And on Quantum Leap, I felt like I did something almost every episode that was different and unique, that I might say, oh, I'd like somebody to see that. Oh, but then I've got this over here. So it was always, I felt in a funny way kind of at a disadvantage, because you can't submit a year, because nobody's going to watch 22 hours of your work. I thought, well, that was an interesting, and there was discussion about that. There were people that disagreed with that submission, but because it wasn't really a straight-ahead Quantum Leap episode, you had to kind of know some of the other characters and the other characters that I leaped into. But it was wonderfully complicated, and as an actor, I thought it was kind of a showy piece. So I picked it. It didn't win, but again, it was nice to be there.
Well, as just a casual viewer at the time, I remember thinking, if he doesn't win for this episode, something's wrong. That was such an incredible piece of work.
Oh, thank you. It was, again, that was one of many shows that were well written, and we were just couldn't wait to get into them, because the script came down and we were just so excited.
I mean, there were so many over the course of those years, but your show had one of the better finales that I remember. I just think that was such an excellent way to wrap up the show. It's a very mysterious episode. But it did feel like, I mean, it could have continued on, but it also felt like a finale.
Well, it was. I've always said that Don should have won the Emmy for that episode, because we weren't canceled when he wrote it. So many of the shows these days, like, okay, this is your last season, so you know that, or they give you a little warning. But we didn't have that warning. We thought it might be our last episode. So Don said, if it's not our last episode, I can't kill anybody, because we may have to come back next year. If it is our last episode, I'd like to tie up something, but there is a chance that we could come back and do a movie of the week or something like that, or this could be turned into a feature. So he had to kind of serve all of those masters, and on top of dealing with the huge weight of any last episode, because it's very hard to please everybody or even come close to pleasing everybody. So I think that what he was able to achieve in that episode was phenomenal when you think of it in that scope, that he had to keep it open and keep all the balls up in the air, but also kind of, if Sam never got home, people would feel some kind of satisfaction.
You've dealt with this show for over 20 years now. What are Quantum Leap fans like?
Well, they're all over the planet. They're growing in number because of reruns and different countries now getting them for the first time. And now I'm meeting a lot of second-generation Quantum fans. They've been introduced to the show by their parents, or relatives who were older, or friends. So they're discovering the show, and that's pretty exciting. So the fans are dedicated. A lot of them I've known for 20 years, because we kind of started this convention thing back in the early 90s. And they are so, like all sci-fi fans share an intelligence about their shows and a desire to know everything they can, and also a desire to suspend belief and expect you to deliver the goods and not screw around with the reality of the show too much. And we serve that, and because of that, they're loyal fans, and they followed me all over. When I travel around the world, they're there quite often. They go see, if I'm in a play in London, they show up in London. If I'm in Washington, D.C. doing something, they show up there. They've made tremendous friendships that have lasted for, apart from me and Dean and everything, that have lasted outside of the show. And they're unique because they're Quantum Leap fans, but they fall into this wonderful, devoted television fan group of discerning, bright fans that want you to, do the right thing, and it's been we've had a good relationship.
Now, when a few years later, you go into the Star Trek world as one of the captain, and was there any hesitation at all going into another sci-fi world? And also, is there any difference between a Star Trek fan and a Quantum Leap fan?
Well, I have been, and prior to Star Trek and since, I get offered a lot of sci-fi stuff, or people send it to me to read, or those kind of things, and I've been very, very hesitant to do too much more sci-fi work. But Star Trek is certainly a long way from Quantum Leap, and I had the advantage of I had an identity in the business prior to Star Trek, so that I wasn't worried about Star Trek becoming my all, my beginning and ending of my career, wrapped up in that show. And that happens, you could say that maybe that happened with Quantum Leap in terms of who am I identified as. But I like I've said this before, that if it had been a continuing in the saga, if it had been post Voyager, I would have said no. But because it was 100 years before Kirk, as soon as they said that to me in the room, I already knew that I wanted to do it, because maybe this was a chicken's way out, but I knew that I wasn't going to have to follow anybody. Yes, technically those shows have been on the air, but I'll be the first captain in space forever. So, however that the history of the franchise goes, that won't change, and that sat well with me. Being a huge Star Trek fan of the original series, that was the one I was most familiar with. I was delighted to kind of take up that mantle and be not following Kirk, but be ahead of him. So I in my own head, I wasn't going to be comparing myself every step on the bridge, to what did Bill do, what did Patrick do, So I felt a sense of relief, and then I was delighted with the pilot script. That was the last part of the puzzle was, well, who am I and what are we going to do? And then I thought, oh, this is good.
Another quantum question I almost forgot to ask you, since we're an awards website. I went back to watch your victory at the Golden Globes in '92, and not only are you excited, but you seemed a little stunned.
Well, I think in '92 that was maybe my third or fourth Golden Globe nomination also, and I hadn't won anything by that point, So you get not that you get jaded, because you really are, the best part of these things are being kind of at the party. You're kind of invited to the dance, and that's, so I love that every time. The Golden Globes were great fun to be a part of, but you just feel like, well, it's just not going to happen. And I had lost in some odd categories in some strange ways for a few years, and to some great performers. So I just really, I was kind of prepared, but not expecting it.
The weird thing about that category, a lot of people don't know, but since you've won it, I'll relay that to anybody that's watching. Drama on TV is so good, especially the past couple of decades, quarter century. Only one person in the last 25 years on the category you won has won more than once, and that was Hugh Laurie. It's been It's been something like 26 out of 27 different men.
Wow.
That includes people like James Gandolfini and Brian. Brian Cranston hasn't even won it yet, but it's a very stacked world when you're on drama TV.
Well, I think that world is steadily gotten better and more interesting, and better opportunities for actors, and as you can see when you look around the landscape, including the cable world now, the actor pool has expanded, and it's tough going out there. It's hard to get a job. again, and the movie people are in and out and happy to be there, and the writers are from movies, and there's this great exchange going on, and creative kind of flow, and the cable world is pushing the network world to kind of step up. I mean, I think Under the Dome's a good example this summer of kind of all of a sudden, wait a minute, people will watch us in the summer on the major networks on CBS and places. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next summer, because traditionally that's when everybody lays out and the cable world has kind of come marching in with new shows. It's a rich landscape, and there are lots of people that want to be a part of it. It's nice to make 13 episodes, so you're not shooting a whole year long, and it's nice to be in one place, and it's also in many ways it's become a more lucrative place to work than in the feature world. So there are a lot of things going for television, and a lot of really, really good television out there.
If you were to do another series for TV, would you be more tempted by a 13-episode kind of a commitment, or more of a standard, what we've had in the past, which is more like a 22?
I think it would depend. I mean, the 13's attractive just because theoretically the sell is you can go off and do theater when you're not, when the show's down, or you can go do a couple movies, and you have flexibility. Creatively, you kind of tell usually one arc or two big arcs, and so the storytelling's a little bit more focused, as opposed to sometimes in 22 you can feel there's a certain fatigue that can hit a series. But I'm not predisposed to go 13 or not. When I did Men of a Certain Age, that was great. We never did it at 13-episode season. We did a 10-episode season. We did a pilot actually one year, and then 9 another year, and then 12 another year. So that was a mess. But that was I enjoyed that a lot. It's you're working, but you're not completely exhausted after 22 and have to go lie down for a month.
Well, another thing I watched recently, I've had a Scott Bakula career viewing party the last few days, shortly before Quantum, and I would say a big reason you got Quantum was your Tony nomination performance in Romance. I watched the Tony Awards from '88 a few nights ago. It looked like you were having a ball doing that particular awards performance, but also just being nominated that year. What did that mean to your career?
Well, that was, it's funny because that show was, I had done a series in LA called Eisenhower and Lutz. It was very successful. We followed Bob Newhart at CBS. Pat Richardson and Delane Matthews were my co-stars. Henderson Forsyth was playing my father. It was a really, really good cast. Alan Burns, it was his show. And so they called me to come to New York to do Romance, and I said, well, if my show gets picked up, I'll be gone, in the summer. And they said, we'll take a chance on that anyway. So I go up there, we start rehearsing, we get to the middle of May, the show's open, it's a critically well received, we get the Tony nominations, and then my TV show gets canceled. So now I'm in New York doing this Broadway run. So and then I get a Tony nomination, and you're performing on the Tony. So it's not just the nomination, which is exciting and scary enough. Now you have to go, and you've done 8 grueling shows a week, and now you have to run over there, rehearse, and then do the show that night, and then be back in the theater doing your show the next night. It adds a huge amount of wear and tear. But you're on adrenaline, and you're flying, and it was, every time I see those numbers, every year I watch the Tonys, I always think about what it was like to get our show's little number up there on the stage with Alison Frazier, and how exciting that was, and sometimes it's good to be younger and a little more ignorant, so you're not really thinking about what's at stake, what's going on. But that was quite an exciting time.
I had Nathan Lane on a few weeks ago, and I asked him something about, I don't know if maybe I asked him would he like to do a play or a musical next, and he said, I'm getting too old for musicals. It's way too much work.
I heard him say that recently, and I understand what he's talking about. I'm not as smart as him, I guess you could say. So I still have a great desire to do musicals whenever I get a chance, and I love that's my first love, and I'm always looking for those kinds of opportunities. So, but I know I hear him, and he's done huge, energetic, physical parts, and that they wear you out. They wear you out, and you've got to be the same. You've got to give the audience on Sunday matinee the same that they got on Tuesday night, and that's what the job is, and it's not easy. And I applaud him. He is it's almost hard to describe what he is. He's a whirlwind. He's not the guy that spins around in the cartoons, not the wildlife guy. He's got everything going, and he's a huge gift to all of us, really.
Well, speaking of singing, and I'm going to ask you a question I bet you've never been asked in an interview before, but I'm a huge Kennedy Center Honors fan.
Yeah.
The year that you serenaded Carol Burnett was one of my favorite highlights ever on the Kennedy Center Honors. What was that particular evening like?
So great. I mean, the Kennedy Center Honors, the first time I did them, I was part of a Sondheim group that we were singing to Stephen. That was daunting, and to say the least. And it was Bernadette and Jason Alexander, and I think
Angela Lansbury did the
Angela. I think it was Angela also. So to be included with them, already I'm underwater. But I was so happy to be there. But then Carol and I had worked together, so she invited me to do one of her specials. So I just love her, adore her, and I was so grateful and glad that they'd asked me to be a part of that tribute. And it was, again, insane, and just everybody just flying in, getting in there was a snowstorm, there were people driving in and from Philly in the snow, and it was just one thing after another. But it was for Carol, and you just when you know Carol and you've met her and you've worked with her, you just do anything for her, and it was so rewarding, so much. I enjoyed it. I had so much fun doing it, and she's an icon. I was just talking about her last night. That's funny that you'd mentioned her today.
Well, she seems so appreciative and like she really, really enjoyed that tribute.
Well, she deserves it, and that's just who she is. She's a gracious, beautiful, inside and out woman, and a gift to all of us. My gosh, what she's created and given to all of us, and she's an amazing woman.
Hey, just a couple of last questions, if you got a moment.
Yeah.
We cover all the award shows. I don't think anybody gives more publicity to the SAG Awards than Gold Derby every year, and you're on that committee that helps put that award show on now. What's it like mounting a big award show like that? Give us a couple of secrets on behind the scenes.
Well, it was tremendously eye-opening to me as a person who's been on award shows and know people that run award shows, but never really, just got the call, they want you to present, or you have to, this is what's going to happen if you win, you go to this microphone, you get a little bit of dabbling, here's some press that you have to do. But, I mean, what I tell people is, that the week after the show airs, we're starting to plan for next year's show. These shows, they don't just happen overnight. There's so many issues, there's so many contracts, there's so many legal things that go on. And then you have all the personalities. It's a big improvised kind of situation, because you don't know until you find out which shows get nominated. You don't have a clue how the seating is going to go. You don't have a clue who's going to show up to present. People say no, 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 no. And there's so many award shows that time of year. This is the last thing I'll say about it. But so now you have people hedging their bets of like, well, we want you to present on our show. Well, okay, well, we'll get back to you. So they're waiting to see if they're going to get invited to the Golden Globes, and if so, then who are they going to present? Or would they rather present at our show, or would they rather cross their fingers and hold out for the Academy Awards? Or so there's so many behind the scenes manipulation going on to try and make it all look like there's nothing going on when you actually get to airtime. We are very good at we reuse our sets. We're the green. We win every year environmental awards. We work in a very old institution here in LA at the Shrine, but we've kept that. We've kind of breathed new life into that area, into that building, and into that particular place. It's a unique show because it's so focused on the actors.